The evening was glowing with gold light spilling through the giant glass windows of the mansion. Laughter echoed through the marble halls. Soft music played from hidden speakers, and the smell of expensive wine drifted in the air. It was one of those nights where rich people tried to outshine each other, showing off jewelry, cars, and stories about money as if they were trading cards. At the center of it all sat Richard Voss, a man everyone in the city knew. Billionaire investor, real estate king. The type of man who never walked into a room, he arrived. His friends called him charming. His employees called him clever. But those who worked for him every day, the cooks, the maids, the drivers, and they just called him Sir. He was tall, perfectly dressed with silver hair brushed back and a smile that always seemed just a little too proud. Everything about him said power. He liked being admired. He liked being the loudest laugh in any room. That night Richard was throwing one of his famous dinner parties. The table was long and shining, filled with crystal glasses and plates that cost more than most people's rent. Around him sat politicians, business partners, and socialites, people who lived in a world so far from ordinary life that they'd forgotten what ordinary even meant. The house staff moved quietly through the room, like shadows, filling glasses, serving dishes, clearing plates before anyone had to ask. One of them was Maria, the maid who had worked for Richard for more than 10 years. Her hair was tied back neatly, her uniform spotless, and her smile polite but tired. She had come to know every corner of that house, every routine, every mood of her boss. She also knew when he was about to show off. Maria's daughter, Lena, had come with her that evening. Usually Maria didn't bring her along, but she had no choice. The babysitter canceled last minute, and she couldn't afford to miss work, not with rent due soon. So she asked Richard's permission to let her daughter wait quietly in the corner while she worked. Surprisingly, he agreed, waving his hand dismissively as if it didn't matter. Lena was 15, shy and small for her age. She wore a simple dress, the kind her mother could afford, and her hair was tied back in a messy ponytail. She didn't say much. She just sat near the hallway, clutching a small book in her lap, watching her mother move back and forth with trays. The mansion was a world she didn't belong to. Every surface sparkled. Every sound was polite and perfect. Even the laughter sounded rehearsed. But the one thing that always caught Lena's attention whenever she visited was the grand piano in the corner of the living room. It was black, shiny, and looked like it had a story to tell. She had seen it many times before, and sometimes when no one was around. She'd sneak into the room and run her fingers over the keys, pressing them softly just to hear a whisper of sound. That night, after the guests finished eating, Richard leaned back in his chair and began to tell stories. The kind that made everyone laugh even when they weren't funny. He loved having an audience. He loved when people looked at him with admiration. As the laughter filled the air, Richard's eyes drifted toward the corner of the room, where he spotted Lena sweeping up small crumbs near the piano. She looked so focused, her little hands moving carefully so she wouldn't disturb anyone. Something about her caught his attention, maybe because she looked so out of place in this world of diamonds and gold. He smirked, then called out loudly, "Hey, you there, the little one." The room fell quiet. Everyone turned to see who he was talking to. Maria froze where she stood, realizing he meant her daughter. "Come here, girl," Richard said with a playful grin. "What's your name?" Lena looked up, startled. Her mother stepped forward quickly. "Sir, she's just helping me clean up." "It's fine, Maria," he interrupted. "I'm just curious. She looks like she's got some spark in her eyes. Come on, what's your name?" "Lena," the girl said softly. "Lena," Richard repeated. "Pretty name. Tell me, Lena, do you play the piano?" He pointed to the grand piano beside her. She hesitated. "A little," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. The guests chuckled. Richard leaned back in his chair, eyes gleaming. "A little? Interesting. Well then, why don't you play something for us?" Maria's heart skipped. "Sir, please, she doesn't—" But Richard held up his hand, grinning. "Relax, Maria, it's all in good fun. Let's see what the girl can do. Tell you what." He laughed, his voice loud and confident. "Play something that impresses me and I'll give you $100 million. The guests burst into laughter. One of them nearly spilled his drink. Another said, "Oh, Richard, you're too much." Richard laughed the loudest. "What, you heard me? 100 million. Go on, little one, play something. Let's see if we've got a secret prodigy here." Lena stood frozen. Her cheeks turned red. Everyone was staring at her. Rich men in suits, women in glittering dresses. Her hands trembled around the broom handle. She looked at her mother, who gave her a tiny shake of the head, silently telling her to just ignore it. But something inside her didn't want to back away. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe she was tired of being invisible. "I can play something," she said quietly. The room went still again. Richard raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Oh, you can?" "Yes," she said. If it's okay." He chuckled, waving his hand. "Of course it's okay. Go on then." Lena set the broom aside and slowly walked to the piano. The guests whispered among themselves. Some smiled, waiting for the joke to continue. Others pulled out their phones, thinking it might be funny to record. Maria stood in the corner, her heart pounding. She wanted to stop her daughter, to save her from the embarrassment, but she couldn't move. She saw the look in Lena's eyes, a mix of fear and determination. She knew that look. It was the same one she had when she left her small hometown years ago, hoping to build a better life. Lena sat down at the piano bench. Her legs barely reached the pedals. She looked at the keys for a moment, taking a deep breath. Her fingers hovered over them, unsure, shaking slightly. The laughter in the room faded. Even Richard, with his smug smile, leaned forward just a little. Lena pressed one key, soft and slow. Then another. Then, almost like a whisper growing into a voice, she began to play a melody. It wasn't anything famous or complicated. It was something she had made up herself. Something she played in her mind when she was sad or when she wanted to forget how hard life was for her and her mom. The tune was gentle, like raindrops on glass. It rose and fell like a sigh, full of small mistakes but big feelings. The room grew quiet. Even the guests who had been smirking moments ago now sat still, their eyes fixed on the girl. The sound filled the big room, soft but powerful in its simplicity. Maria's eyes welled up. She had never heard her daughter play like that before. It wasn't just music. It was everything they had been through turned into sound. All the nights of tiredness, all the small dreams they never said out loud. It was all there in that melody. When the last note faded, Lena lifted her hand slowly from the keys. She looked around nervously. No one laughed. For a moment, there was just silence. Then someone clapped. Another followed. Soon the whole room was applauding, softly at first, then louder. Richard smiled awkwardly, trying to play it cool. "Well, well," he said, clapping a few times. "Didn't expect that." Lena stood up quietly and gave a small nod. "Thank you," she said. Maria rushed forward and gently held her daughter's hand. "Come, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice shaking. They stepped back toward the hallway, heart still racing. As they disappeared from the room, Richard leaned back in his chair, staring at the piano. For the first time that night, he didn't have anything clever to say. He laughed under his breath and took a sip of his drink. But this time it didn't sound quite the same. What started as a joke had suddenly turned into something else. Something he didn't understand yet, but soon would. The next morning, the mansion was quiet again. The guests had gone home. The lights were dimmed and the smell of perfume and wine had faded away. Only the clinking of dishes in the kitchen and the faint sound of vacuuming filled the air. Maria was already working, moving slowly as she cleaned the giant dining room table from last night's party. Her back ached, but her thoughts weren't on the work. They were on her daughter. She still couldn't believe what had happened. Every time she thought about it, her chest felt tight. Pride and fear mixing together in one strange feeling. She replayed the sound of the piano in her head. Lena had played so beautifully, like she wasn't afraid of anyone, not even a man like Richard Voss. Maria looked up when she heard footsteps. It was Richard himself, walking down the grand staircase with a cup of coffee in hand. He looked relaxed, almost cheerful. When he noticed Maria, he stopped for a second and gave her a small smile. "Morning," he said casually. "Good morning, sir," she replied, lowering her head a little. He took a sip of his coffee. "Your daughter. She surprised me last night." Maria froze for a second, unsure how to respond. "Yes, sir. I'm sorry if she—" He waved his hand. No, don't apologize. She was actually quite good. Didn't expect that." Maria smiled politely. "Thank you, sir. She just loves music." Richard nodded slowly, almost thoughtful. "How did she learn to play like that? Has she had lessons?" Maria shook her head. "No, sir. We can't afford them. She teaches herself. Sometimes she watches videos online. Sometimes she practices when no one is using the piano here. He raised an eyebrow. Here in this house? Maria's eyes widened. I'm sorry, sir, she never touches anything without permission. He laughed softly. Relax, I'm not angry. I just didn't know. That's impressive, actually. Maria let out a small breath of relief. She's a good girl, sir. She just loves to learn. Richard nodded, still thinking. Well, she has talent. Maybe she should keep at it. Then, as if the thought bored him, he turned and walked away. Tell her she did well, he said over his shoulder before disappearing down the hall. For Maria, that single sentence felt like a heavy stone had been lifted off her chest. For years, she had seen how cold and careless her boss could be, but hearing him say something kind about her daughter felt like a small miracle. That afternoon, when her shift ended, Maria and Lena walked home together. Their apartment was small, just 2 rooms above a grocery store, but it was home. The paint on the walls was peeling and the pipes made strange noises, but Maria always kept it clean. The moment they stepped inside, Lena dropped her school bag and fell onto the old couch with a tired sigh. Did I embarrass you last night? She asked quietly. Maria sat beside her. No, my love. You made me proud. Lena smiled a little. Everyone was laughing at first. I know, Maria said, brushing her daughter's hair back. But they weren't laughing at the end, were they? Lena shook her head. No, they looked surprised, Maria nodded, because they saw something they didn't expect. They saw who you really are. For a moment, the two sat in silence. The sound of traffic came through the window, mixed with the soft hum of the fridge. It was peaceful in a way the mansion never was. Do you think Mr. Voss was serious? Lena asked suddenly. About the $100 million? Maria laughed softly. Of course not. He was joking. That man doesn't even know what to do with all the money he already has. Lena giggled. Yeah, I know. I just thought... Maybe for a second. Maria smiled sadly. Don't think about the money. Think about the music. That's what matters, Lena nodded, her eyes distant. I just want to keep playing. Then you will, Maria said firmly. No matter what. The next few days went on as usual, but something had changed. When Maria came to work, a few of the other staff members whispered about Lena's performance. One of the drivers said he had seen a guest post a short clip of it online. It's getting a lot of views, he said with a grin. People love it. Maria didn't know what to think. She had never been the type to trust social media or care about fame. But that night, when she checked on her old phone, she found the video. Someone had indeed uploaded it. Maid's daughter stuns billionaire guests with piano performance. The caption made her heart race. There was Lena, sitting at the piano, her small hands moving over the keys. The comments were full of praise. She plays with so much emotion. That girl deserves a real chance. The billionaire should keep his promise. What's her story? She's amazing. Maria showed it to Lena, who gasped in disbelief. That's me. She whispered, eyes wide. There's so many views. Maria smiled but also felt nervous. It's okay, my love. Let's not get too excited. People on the internet forget quickly. But she was wrong. The video didn't fade away. It kept growing. Every day there were more comments, more shares, more people asking who Lena was. By the end of the week, news outlets started reaching out. A small local channel even called Maria to ask if they could interview her daughter. At the mansion, Richard's phone began buzzing too. His assistant walked into his office one morning holding a tablet. Sir, have you seen this? She asked. He looked up from his desk. Seen what? The video. From your party. The girl playing the piano. Richard frowned, then watched the clip. His face shifted slowly from amusement to surprise. This is everywhere, he murmured. How many views? Almost 2 million, sir. People are calling it the Billionaire Challenge. They're tagging you, asking if you'll keep your promise. Richard leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin. You're kidding. No, sir. It's trending. He watched the video again. The same melody, the same small girl sitting at his piano. Something about it felt different now. When it happened, he thought it was funny. Just a moment to entertain his guests. But seeing it online, stripped of the laughter, it made him look, well, not very kind. His assistant hesitated before speaking again. Some comments aren't good, sir. They're saying you mocked a poor child, that you made fun of someone's daughter. Richard sighed, annoyed. Of course they are. The internet loves drama. Yes, sir. But maybe it would be good PR to respond. Show support for her, maybe make a statement. He didn't answer right away. He just stared out the window, watching the city below. The idea of apologizing didn't sit well with him. But he wasn't stupid. He knew how fast public opinion could turn. Meanwhile, back in their small apartment, life was turning upside down for Maria and Lena. Calls and messages kept coming. Some from strangers offering to pay for piano lessons, others from journalists wanting a story. Maria didn't know who to trust, but she was careful. She had seen how quickly fame could change people. Lena, though, was glowing with excitement. Mom, they want me to play at a school concert next week. The music teacher said I can use their piano. Maria smiled nervously. That's wonderful, honey. Just remember, stay humble. Be yourself. I will, Lena said, hugging her. I just want to make people feel something. Like I did that night, and she did. Every time she played, it was like the world got quieter, just for a little while. But not everyone was happy. A few of the mansion staff whispered that the attention was causing trouble. Mr. Voss doesn't like being made fun of, one of them said quietly. He's not used to being the bad guy. Maria worried again. She didn't want her job at risk. She had worked too hard, too long to lose everything. But deep down, she knew something big was happening. Something she couldn't stop even if she wanted to. Days later, when she arrived at work, she found a note waiting for her in the kitchen. It was from Richard's assistant. Mr. Voss would like to speak with you and your daughter tomorrow morning. Maria felt her stomach twist. She didn't know if it was good or bad news. But that night, she didn't tell Lena the whole truth. She just said, We're going to the mansion tomorrow. Mr. Voss wants to talk. Lena smiled, her eyes bright. Do you think he'll be mad? Maria looked at her daughter, her brave, hopeful girl, and shook her head softly.
No, my love, I think...
Maybe he finally wants to listen, but deep inside she wasn't sure. The next morning was cold and cloudy, the kind of morning where the world feels quiet before something important happens. Maria woke up earlier than usual, her heart already racing. She didn't know what to expect from the meeting with Richard Voss. She stood in the small kitchen of their apartment preparing breakfast while her daughter got ready. The smell of toast filled the air. Are you nervous? Lena asked, looking at her mother while tying her shoes. A little, Maria admitted, but we'll be fine. Just be polite, answer what he asks, and don't worry too much. Lena smiled softly. Do you think he's mad? Maria hesitated before answering. I don't think so. Maybe he just wants to talk about the video. Maybe he's curious. Lena nodded and looked down at her hands. It's weird. So many people know who I am now. I never thought something like that could happen. Maria smiled faintly. Life surprises us sometimes. Just remember who you are, okay? Stay humble. Stay kind. I will, Lena said, hugging her mother tightly. When they arrived at the mansion, the guards at the gate already knew they were expected. The big iron doors opened slowly, and Maria felt her stomach twist. The house looked even bigger than usual, tall windows shining in the weak morning light. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and polished wood. The house staff nodded respectfully as Maria walked in with her daughter. Richard's assistant, a young woman in a gray suit, met them near the stairs. Good morning, she said with a polite smile. Mr. Voss is waiting for you in the music room. Maria's hands tightened around her purse. Thank you, she said quietly. They walked down the long hallway. Lena glanced around, noticing how clean and perfect everything was. The paintings on the wall, the tall plants, the marble floors. It all looked like something out of a dream. When they reached the music room, Richard was already there, sitting by the piano. The same piano Lena had played that night. He wasn't wearing his usual sharp suit, just a sweater and jeans, but he still looked powerful in that quiet way rich people do when they're thinking. Come in, he said, his voice calm. Maria stepped forward and bowed slightly. Good morning, sir. Richard smiled faintly. Good morning, Maria, and you must be Lena. Lena nodded shyly. Yes, sir. He gestured for them to sit. I hope you don't mind that I asked you here. I thought we should talk. Maria nodded. Of course, sir. For a moment, the room was quiet. Richard looked at Lena, then at the piano. You know, he said, I can't stop thinking about that night. You played beautifully. Thank you, Lena said softly. He leaned back in his chair. The video of you playing, it's gone viral. Millions of people have seen it. My name is all over it too. I didn't expect that. Maria shifted nervously in her seat. We didn't post it, sir. Someone at the party did. Richard nodded. I know, I'm not angry about that. Actually, it made me realize something. He paused, then looked directly at Lena. You've got real talent. You didn't just play notes. You played with heart. That's rare. Lena's cheeks turned pink. Thank you, sir. He gave a small smile. Don't call me sir. Just Richard is fine. Maria looked surprised but said nothing. Richard stood up and walked to the piano. He ran his fingers lightly over the keys. Do you know how much this piano costs, Lena? She shook her head. More than what most people make in a year, he said with a chuckle. But when you played it, it sounded different. Better even. Like it finally had a purpose. Maria smiled faintly, unsure if he was serious or teasing again. Richard turned to them. I want to help you. Both of you. Maria's eyes widened. Help us? Yes, he said. I've been thinking. The internet's calling me out, saying I should keep my promise. Obviously, giving $100 million is ridiculous, even for me. He laughed lightly, then continued. But what I can do is something real. I can pay for Lena's music education. Proper lessons. Maybe even get her into a good school. What do you say? Lena's mouth fell open. Really? Richard nodded. Really. You have something special, kid. It shouldn't go to waste. Maria felt her eyes fill with tears. Richard. That's too kind. We could never repay you, he waved a hand. You don't have to repay me. Consider it an investment, not in money, but in talent. Lena couldn't stop smiling. I won't let you down, she said earnestly. Richard chuckled. I don't think you will. They spent a little while longer in the room. Richard asked Lena about her favorite songs, what kind of music she liked, and what inspired her. She told him about how she learned from watching videos, how she used to sneak into the room after cleaning hours just to play a few notes. Instead of being upset, Richard laughed softly. That's dedication. I like that. Before they left, he told them, I'll have my assistant arrange everything. Lessons, transportation, even a new piano for your home. It's time you had one of your own. Maria's hands covered her mouth. A piano? For us? He nodded. Yes, you can't learn without an instrument. Consider it the start of your journey. Lena couldn't believe it. She wanted to cry, laugh, and jump all at once. When they finally left the mansion, the gray clouds had started to break, and bits of sunlight peeked through. It felt like a sign, like the world was suddenly brighter. As they walked home, Lena couldn't stop talking. Can you believe it, Mom? Real lessons, a piano. He actually wants to help me. Maria smiled, holding her daughter's hand tightly. You deserve it, my love. You worked hard, and someone finally saw it. But even as she said the words, a small part of her heart felt uneasy. She had seen people like Richard before, generous when the cameras were watching, but quick to forget once the attention faded. She didn't want her daughter's heart broken. Still, when they got home that evening, Maria let herself hope. For once, things didn't feel impossible. A few days later, the new piano arrived. It wasn't as grand as the one in the mansion, but it was beautiful. Dark brown wood, smooth keys, perfect sound. The delivery men left, and Lena just stood there staring at it like she couldn't believe it was real. Go on, Maria said, smiling. Play something. Lena sat down slowly, her hands trembling with excitement. She began to play the same song from that night, the one that had changed everything. The soft melody filled their small apartment, turning it into something magical. Neighbors stopped outside their door to listen. Even the old man downstairs shouted up, Who's playing that? It's beautiful. Maria laughed through her tears. For the first time in a long time, the world felt kind. Over the next few weeks, Lena began taking lessons from a real music teacher arranged by Richard's office. Every Saturday, a driver picked her up and took her to a small studio across town. The teacher, an older woman with kind eyes, said after the first lesson, She has a gift. Real talent. Maria's heart swelled every time she heard it. But not everything was smooth. The video online kept spreading, and some people started making jokes about the Billionaire's challenge. News stations replayed the moment when Richard made his offer, cutting it to make him look bad. They said things like, should he pay what he promised? And was it a cruel joke or a test of talent? Richard began to get tired of it. Every interview he gave, reporters brought it up. He started avoiding questions about Lena altogether. Meanwhile, Lena stayed focused on her music. She practiced every night until her fingers ached. For her, it wasn't about fame or money. It was about the sound, the feeling, the peace it gave her. But Maria noticed something changing. Richard's calls came less often. His assistant canceled one of the lessons due to scheduling conflicts. The driver stopped showing up on time. Maria tried not to worry, but deep down, she knew what was happening. The excitement was fading, and soon they might be forgotten. One evening, while Lena played quietly in their living room, Maria sat by the window, staring at the city lights. She thought about everything that had happened, the laughter, the applause, the promises. "Mom," Lena said softly, "do you think he'll still help me later?" Maria turned to look at her. "Of course, my love. Don't worry about that now. Just keep playing. No one can take that from you." Lena smiled faintly and turned back to the piano. The melody rose again, soft and steady like hope refusing to fade. Outside, the city lights flickered in the distance. Somewhere in his tall glass tower, Richard Voss sat at his desk, watching a new headline scroll across his screen, and for the first time in weeks, he felt something he didn't expect: guilt, because deep down he knew the story wasn't over yet. The days began to pass quietly again. For a while, everything seemed steady. Lena kept practicing her music every night, filling their small apartment with soft, beautiful sounds. Her piano teacher, who came once a week, said she was improving fast, faster than most students who had years of training. Maria couldn't have been prouder. Every time she watched her daughter play, she saw more than just a girl at a piano. She saw strength, heart, and the kind of hope that made all the hard years worth it. But outside their little world, the noise about the billionaire and the maid's daughter story had started to grow louder again. Some people were calling it inspiring. Others were calling it unfair. One morning, while Maria was cleaning the mansion, she overheard two of the staff whispering near the kitchen. "They're still talking about it on TV," one of them said. "They say Mr. Voss broke his promise." Maria froze, pretending not to listen. The other worker replied, "He didn't break it. He's paying for lessons, isn't he?" "Yeah, but the internet doesn't care. They just want a story. They want drama." Maria sighed quietly and kept working. She didn't like hearing people talk about it. To her, the whole thing wasn't about promises or fame. It was about her daughter finally getting a chance. But she also knew how quickly people could change their minds. That evening, when she got home, Lena was sitting at the piano. Her face serious. "Mom," she said softly, "my teacher said I could play in a small concert next month." Maria's eyes widened. "A concert? That's wonderful." Lena nodded slowly. "It's not a big one, just for students. But she said it would be good for me to perform in front of people again." Maria smiled and sat beside her. "You'll be amazing, my love." Just like before, Lena hesitated. "Do you think Mr. Voss will come?" Maria looked at her daughter, unsure how to answer. "I don't know, dear. He's a very busy man." Lena nodded quietly, though she looked disappointed. "It would be nice if he did. He started all this." Maria placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Then maybe we should invite him." A few days later, she did. She left a small note for Richard's assistant, written neatly on plain paper. "Sir, Lena will be playing in her first student concert next month. We wanted to thank you for helping her reach this point. It would mean a lot if you could attend." She didn't expect a reply, but to her surprise, 3 days later, a letter arrived at their apartment. It was short and formal, written by the assistant, not Richard himself. "Mr. Voss appreciates the invitation. His schedule is very full, but he will try his best to attend." Lena read it twice, smiling from ear to ear. "He might come, Mom. He really might." Maria smiled too, though part of her wondered if "try his best" just meant probably not. Still, she didn't want to take away her daughter's excitement. As the weeks passed, Lena practiced harder than ever. She spent hours at the piano, sometimes until midnight, her fingers moving over the keys like she was chasing something only she could hear. She was nervous but also thrilled. It wasn't about money or fame anymore. She just wanted to show the world what she loved. Meanwhile, things were different for Richard. He sat in his large office overlooking the city, scrolling through another news headline that mentioned his name. The video still wasn't going away. In fact, it had spread to international outlets. Some called him generous for supporting Lena. Others called him arrogant for making such a joke in the first place. Every time he read the comments, he felt a strange mix of irritation and guilt. He had meant it as a joke, a careless moment in a room full of laughter. But now the world saw it as something cruel. His assistant knocked and entered the room. "Sir, you've been invited to the student piano recital next month." "It's the girl, Lena." "I know," he said. "Will you go?" He looked out the window for a moment, then sighed. "I'll think about it." When the day of the concert finally arrived, Maria and Lena dressed in their best clothes. Maria wore her cleanest blouse and the skirt she saved for special occasions. Lena wore a simple white dress her teacher had given her. It wasn't fancy, but it made her feel confident. They took the bus to the small theater where the recital was being held. It wasn't a big place, just a cozy hall with about 100 seats. Parents and students filled the room, chatting softly and taking photos. As they found their seats, Maria glanced around. She couldn't see Richard anywhere, but she tried not to let it show on her face. When it was Lena's turn to perform, she walked up to the stage, her small hands clutching the sides of her dress. She took a deep breath, looked out at the audience and then at the piano waiting for her. She sat down, closed her eyes for a moment, and began to play. The melody started soft, almost like a whisper. It wasn't a famous song. It was one she had written herself. The same kind of heartfelt tune that had touched everyone that night in the mansion. The sound filled the little hall, and soon all the quiet chatter faded. People leaned forward, listening closely. Maria's eyes filled with tears. It didn't matter if anyone else understood, she did. Every note was a piece of their life. The struggle, the laughter, the hope. When the last note faded, there was silence, then applause. The audience clapped, some even standing. Lena stood and bowed shyly, her cheeks pink. Maria couldn't stop smiling. "You did it," she whispered when her daughter came running into her arms. "You did it, my love." As they hugged, Maria glanced toward the back of the halls and froze. Standing near the door, half hidden in the shadows, was Richard Voss. He was dressed simply. No bodyguards, no entourage. Just standing there, watching quietly. When their eyes met, he nodded once, a small, respectful gesture. After the concert ended, he walked over to them. People whispered as he passed. It wasn't every day a billionaire showed up at a student recital. "You were wonderful," Richard said to Lena, smiling softly. "You've improved a lot." "Thank you," she said, her eyes bright. "I didn't think you'd come. I said I'd try," he replied. "And I'm glad I did." Maria thanked him quietly, her voice filled with emotion. "It means a lot that you came, sir." He looked at her kindly. "You raised a remarkable daughter, Maria. You should be proud." "I am," she said softly. Richard looked around at the small hall, the happy families, the teachers congratulating students. For a moment, he felt something he hadn't in a long time: humility. On their way out, a few parents approached him, asking for photos or compliments, but he politely declined. He wasn't there for attention. He was there for something else, to understand why that moment, that girl, had stayed in his mind all this time. Before leaving, he turned to Maria and said, "I want to do more for her." Maria looked startled. "More?" "Yes," he said simply. "She deserves every opportunity. I have friends in the music industry, people who can help her grow. She shouldn't be limited by where she comes from." Tears filled Maria's eyes again. "You've already done so much." He shook his head. "Not enough. Not yet." That night, as they rode the bus home, Lena rested her head on her mother's shoulder, tired but happy. "Did he really mean it?" she asked sleepily. Maria smiled and kissed her forehead. "I think he did." Outside the window, the city lights shimmered against the dark sky. Somewhere far away in his quiet mansion, Richard Voss sat at his desk with a pen in hand. He began writing something, and not a check but a letter. In it, he explained his plan to create a scholarship fund, not just for Lena but for other children like her. Kids who had dreams but no means to chase them. As he wrote, he realized something important. Money could buy almost anything, except the feeling he had when he heard that girl play. That, he thought, was priceless. And for the first time in years, Richard smiled, not the proud, showy smile people were used to, but a real one. Because deep down he knew this story, the one that started as a joke, was slowly becoming something far greater than he ever imagined. The weeks after the recital felt like a dream for Lena and her mother. Things were calmer, happier. Every day, Lena practiced on her old keyboard at home, still using the same small stool that wobbled a little on one side. But now her music sounded brighter, more confident. Maria often stood in the doorway, smiling softly as she watched her daughter play. It was hard to believe that just months ago, Lena was the quiet girl who hid from attention. Now she carried herself with quiet pride, as if she finally believed she belonged on that stage. One morning, Maria was cleaning the mansion when Richard's assistant approached her. He was polite, as always, but there was something different in his tone this time. "Mr. Voss would like to see you for a moment," he said. Maria nodded, wiping her hands on her apron, and followed him through the long hall to the office. She knocked gently before entering. Richard looked up from his desk. He wasn't wearing his usual sharp suit, just a simple shirt. He seemed calm, thoughtful. "Good morning, Maria," he said kindly. "Please sit down." Maria hesitated, unsure if she should, but he insisted. She sat on the edge of the chair, nervous. "I wanted to tell you something," he began. "I've been thinking a lot since the recital." She nodded slowly, unsure where this was going. "I realized that what your daughter did, it wasn't just talent. It was heart," he said. "And it reminded me of something I'd forgotten. What it means to create something beautiful without expecting anything in return." Maria didn't know what to say. She simply listened. He continued. "That's why I've started something new. A scholarship fund in Lena's name. It's called the Open Keys Foundation. It'll help young musicians who can't afford lessons or instruments." Maria's eyes widened. "In her name?" He smiled softly. "Yes, Lena inspired it. And I wanted her to know that she's already making a difference." For a moment, Maria couldn't speak. She blinked rapidly, tears filling her eyes. "Sir, I don't know what to say. Thank you doesn't feel enough." "You don't have to thank me," Richard said. This was the right thing to do. When Maria told Lena that evening, the girl just sat there quietly at first, staring in disbelief. "In my name?" she whispered. Maria nodded, smiling. "Yes, sweetheart, yours." Lena covered her mouth, tears forming. "Mom, that's crazy." "I'm just—" Maria hugged her tight. "Yes, and that's exactly why it's so special." In the days that followed, things began to change quickly. Reporters started calling. Music schools sent letters. The story spread again, this time not about a billionaire's joke, but about a girl whose music had started a movement. The foundation held its launch event at a small concert hall downtown. Richard asked both Lena and Maria to attend. When they arrived, the hall was filled with photographers, reporters, and guests dressed in elegant clothes. But at the center of it all stood a large banner with simple white letters, the Open Keys Foundation, inspired by Lena. Lena looked up at it, speechless. Richard greeted them warmly. "I'm glad you both came," he said. "This event is for you." She smiled shyly. "It's really beautiful, sir." He leaned closer and said quietly, "It's your story that made it possible. I just helped it find a home." The event began with a few short speeches. Richard spoke about opportunity, humility, and how talent doesn't always come from privilege. Then he invited Lena to play something to mark the beginning of the foundation. She froze for a second. She hadn't prepared anything. But the audience clapped softly, encouraging her. She took a deep breath and sat at the piano. This time her fingers didn't tremble. The melody that flowed was warm and gentle, filled with gratitude. The audience sat in silence, listening as her music told the story. A story of laughter that turned into hope, and hope that turned into something real. When she finished, the hall erupted in applause. Some even stood. Cameras flashed, capturing her smile. Afterward, as the guests mingled, people approached Maria and Lena to congratulate them. Many shared their own stories. Parents of children who loved music but couldn't afford lessons. Young students who dreamed of playing but had no instruments. It was overwhelming, but in the best way. Later that evening, when the crowd had thinned, Richard walked over to them again. "You did wonderful," he said softly. "Thank you," Lena replied. "I was nervous, but it felt right," he smiled. "That's what music does. It makes things right even when words can't." Maria looked at him and said, "You've changed a lot, sir. You're not the same man from that night," he chuckled lightly. "No, I suppose I'm not. Maybe I needed a reminder of who I wanted to be." They talked a bit longer, and before leaving, Richard handed Lena a small envelope. "This is for you," he said. "Don't open it until you're home." That night, when they returned to their apartment, Lena carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a short handwritten note. "For when the world gets too loud, never stop playing. The world needs your sound." And beneath the note was a small key. A piano key charm made of silver, attached to a necklace chain. Lena held it close, smiling. "He's not so bad after all," she said softly. Maria laughed. No, not at all. The next morning, the news was everywhere. The story of the foundation, the photos of Lena performing, the interviews with Richard. It had all gone viral again. But this time the comments were different. People weren't arguing or criticizing. They were inspired. Messages flooded social media. This story made me cry. "My daughter started piano lessons today because of Lena. Kindness can come from anywhere." In the weeks that followed, letters and emails poured in from all over the world. A music school in another country even offered Lena a scholarship to study formally, once she was ready. Maria kept every letter in a small box under their bed. One day, she told Lena, "You'll look back and realize how many hearts you touched, but fame didn't change them. They still lived simply." Maria still worked part-time at the mansion, though Richard often told her she didn't have to. She said she wanted to. It gave her peace. Lena still practiced every evening, sometimes alone, sometimes with her teacher, sometimes just for her mother. Music was no longer just a dream. It had become part of their everyday life. One afternoon, Maria was dusting the piano in the mansion when Richard walked by. He stopped and smiled. "You know," he said, "this house feels quieter without her music echoing through it." Maria smiled. "I think that's a good thing, sir. It means the music found where it truly belongs." He nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, I suppose it did." Then he added, "I'm planning something else, a concert tour for the Foundation's students next year. I want Lena to be part of it as the opening performer." Maria's heart swelled with pride. "She'll be honored, sir. Truly." That night, when she told Lena, the girl's eyes went wide. "A concert tour? Mom, that's huge." Maria nodded. "Yes, it is. But remember, this is just the beginning. You still have to stay humble and kind." "I know," Lena said with a grin. "I'll just keep doing what I love," and she did. Every note she played, every smile she shared carried the same warmth that had once silenced a room full of laughter. Richard, too, found himself changed in ways he hadn't expected. He began visiting schools supported by the Foundation, listening to children play. He no longer laughed at the idea of talent coming from unlikely places. In fact, he started to believe that real brilliance often did. The story of the maid's daughter had changed his life as much as it had changed hers, and though the world had moved on to other news, the sound of Lena's piano lived on, in classrooms, small concerts, and the hearts of those who heard her story. What began as a careless joke had become a legacy. The following year moved faster than anyone expected. Lena's name had quietly spread across music circles. What began as one small recital turned into invitations for bigger performances. Schools, radio stations, and even television hosts wanted to meet the girl whose music had inspired the world. But Lena stayed the same. She still practiced in the evenings, still helped her mother wash dishes, and still smiled shyly when people complimented her. She never forgot where she started or who helped her get there. The foundation Richard had created, the Open Keys Foundation, had already helped over 50 children by then. Many came from small towns and poor families. Some had never even touched a piano before. Now they were learning and growing just like Lena once did. Maria often said, "It's not just about music anymore. It's about hope." One morning, Richard called Maria and Lena to his office. When they arrived, he looked excited, almost like a child who couldn't wait to share good news. "I have something to tell you both," he said with a smile. "The Foundation's first big concert tour is happening in 2 months, and we want Lena to open the very first show." Lena's mouth fell open. "Me, the opening performer?" He nodded. "Yes, you'll be representing everything this foundation stands for. Courage, hard work, and heart." Maria was speechless. She blinked, trying to hold back tears. This is incredible, sir." Richard smiled kindly. "You both deserve it." For weeks after that, Lena practiced more than ever. Every note had to be perfect. not because anyone demanded it, but because she wanted to honor the journey that brought her there. Maria helped in every way she could, making sure Lena ate properly, rested, and didn't lose herself in nerves. "Remember, my love," she would say, "you don't have to impress anyone. Just play from your heart. That's what people feel the most." The day of the concert came quickly. The venue was a grand theater in the city, with soft golden lights and rows of seats stretching far back. It was the biggest stage Lena had ever seen. As she stood behind the curtain, she could hear the hum of the audience, hundreds of people talking, waiting, excited. Her hands trembled a little, but she smiled when she saw her mother waiting at the side, giving her a small thumbs up. "You've got this," Maria whispered. Lena nodded, took a deep breath, and stepped onto the stage. The lights hit her softly as she walked to the piano at the center. She looked out at the crowd, so many faces, all silent now. For a second, her mind flashed back to that night long ago, in the billionaire's mansion. The laughter, the fear, the trembling hands. And then she remembered the moment everything changed, when she stopped being afraid and just played. She sat down, took another breath, and began. The music that filled the hall was pure and full of life. It wasn't just a song, it was a story. Every note carried pieces of her past, the long nights her mother worked, the loneliness of their small apartment, the laughter that once hurt but now meant nothing, and the kindness that had bloomed from it all. As she played, Richard watched from the front row, his hands clasped together. He had seen her play many times now, but this was different. It wasn't just about talent anymore, it was about truth. He could feel it in every sound, every pause, every soft moment of silence between notes. When the final note faded, there was a heartbeat of stillness. And then applause. It started softly, then grew louder and louder until the entire hall was on its feet. Lena stood, her face glowing under the lights. She bowed deeply, and as she rose, her eyes met her mother's. Maria was crying, smiling through her tears, clapping harder than anyone else. After the show, people surrounded them, reporters, guests, other performers, all eager to meet the girl who had just played the heart out of a piano. But Lena didn't rush. She walked straight to her mother, hugged her tight, and whispered, "We did it." Maria whispered back, "No, you did it, my love." Richard joined them a moment later, his eyes shining. "That," he said, "was something I'll never forget." "Thank you for giving me the chance," Lena said sincerely. He shook his head. "No, you gave me the chance, and to change, to see life differently." They all stood there quietly for a moment, surrounded by the soft hum of people talking and laughing in the background. As the weeks went by, the concert tour continued. Lena traveled with the foundation team, visiting cities and meeting children who were learning music through the program. She listened to their stories that sounded a lot like hers, and played with them, encouraging them to never give up. Maria sometimes traveled with her, sometimes stayed home, but she was always there in spirit. Every night, Lena called her saying, "Mom, the crowd clapped today, really clapped." And Maria would laugh and say, "Of course they did. You're their voice." One evening near the end of the tour, Lena was sitting backstage watching the younger students rehearse. She smiled as she saw their nervous faces, remembering her own. Richard came and sat beside her quietly. "They remind you of yourself, don't they?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes, I know how they feel, scared but hopeful." He looked out at the stage. "You know, I used to think success was about numbers. The next deal, the next project, the next million. But you made me realize it's about something else and what we leave behind for others." She looked at him thoughtfully. "I think that's what music does too. It leaves something behind," he smiled. "You're wiser than most adults I know." They both laughed softly. By the time the final concert ended, the Open Keys Foundation had grown bigger than anyone expected. Donations poured in from people around the world. More schools wanted to join. More children wanted to learn. And through it all, Lena remained the quiet, kind-hearted girl who loved to play. A few months later, a television station invited her for an interview. The host asked her, "If you could say one thing to the man who made that first promise, the one that started everything, what would you say?" Lena smiled gently. "I'd say thank you. Not for the promise, but for keeping it in a way that changed lives. He didn't have to give me $100 million. What he gave me instead was something far more valuable: belief. That line spread across the internet again. People shared it everywhere, saying how powerful it was. Even Richard saw it and smiled quietly to himself. He knew she was right. Months later, on a quiet afternoon, Maria and Lena visited the mansion again. This time not as workers or guests, but as friends. The house looked the same, but it felt different now, warmer. Richard welcomed them in with tea and a relaxed smile. They sat together, laughing and remembering how it all began. That one night when a joke turned into a journey. At one point, Maria said, "It's strange, isn't it? How something so small can change so much." Richard nodded. Yes. It's proof that life always has a way of surprising us. Before leaving, Lena played once more on the same piano where it had all started. The same instrument that once heard laughter now heard gratitude. As she finished, Richard clapped softly. "You know," he said, "I never did give you that $100 million. Lena grinned. "You did, just not in money," he laughed. "Fair enough." Maria smiled at both of them. "I think we all got more than we expected." That evening, as the sun set over the city, Lena looked out from the balcony. The sky glowed in shades of gold and pink, and she felt a quiet peace wash over her. Her life had changed, yes, but so had the lives of many others. What started as a joke had become a song that would never fade, and somewhere deep down she knew it wasn't just about the piano anymore. It was about what happens when kindness and courage meet in the unlikeliest of places. Because sometimes, a simple melody can rewrite the story of an entire life.